You're listening to the Jiu Jitsu Lou podcast, and I'm Lou Temlett. I'm guessing you're having a good day because either you've been on the mats, considering getting on the mats, or maybe taking yourself to train. I'm so happy you're here listening or watching this episode. Please don't tap out before the end. When you want to continue a form of martial art, start training Jiu Jitsu. I'd like to welcome Aimee Carver to my podcast. Hi Aimee, how are you?
Hi, I'm very good. And yourself?
Very well, thank you. It's wonderful to connect with you again after meeting you in Barcelona at the IBJJF Masters a couple of weeks ago. I was very pleased to see another smiley face from my local area, kind of Bath and Bristol. So it was great to see you. Tell me how you got on in Barcelona and how the experience was for you.
Yeah, I mean, the experience was full on, like it was intense. It just, just like yourself, it was my first competition. So it was a lot about just kind of figuring out what competition looks like, all that sort of stuff. But yeah, I had a 3-person bracket. So I had 2 fights on the day. I lost both of my fights and got my default bronze, not my first default medal, and I'm sure won't be my last in the world of sport. So but it was a great, really professional environment, and it was really, big. It was huge, wasn't it? It was. It was a great event. And like you say, being your first kind of jiu-jitsu competition experience, there's a reason why both of us decided that Masters in Barcelona was to be our first competition, because both of us register for competitions, get refunds, don't have opponents. And if we were going to have an opponent, a Masters European competition would be the place. Do you agree, Aimee? No, absolutely. I didn't want to make a habit out of competing. It's a lot of like time and money and resource and mental, emotional, physical energy, all that kind of stuff. So it's not something I necessarily had in mind for myself as part of my sort of jiu-jitsu journey. But I felt like once I got my 3rd stripe on my white belt, and I could see that I was kind of like, starting to progress through that white belt journey. I was like, I think you have to try everything once, right? I think you have to just see what that's like, and then if you like it, you can kind of go from there. If you don't, you can go, well, that's not for me, I'm not doing that again, kind of thing. But at least I could say that I kind of tried. And like looked around locally at things like the Somerset Open and things like that, local tournaments. And it's hard, like you've got to find, your M1, female, white belt, super heavy, like, all of those things have got to kind of tie up. And it was never anybody in my category. And even with the Europeans, it wasn't until I think 4 weeks out from the competition that somebody else signed up in my bracket. And then it was literally, I got myself signed up right away as soon as I saw that there was someone else there. And then it wasn't until I think 2 days before the schedule came out that then a 3rd person went into the bracket, because they didn't have anyone in their bracket and they'd requested to sort of move brackets, so they'd come up into our sort of weight class. So very like, even on the one of the biggest stages, the highest level that you can really compete at, there was still one and then literally 2 right at the end kind of opponents. So certainly not easy to find women the same age, the same belt, the same weight category, to compete against. So that was kind of for me. And as well, it's like, go on a little holiday. I thought, at least if I get absolutely flattened in like 30 seconds, I don't have to like cry going down the M5 off the back of like, a loss at Hutton Moor. I can like, go out to the beach and cry there instead,
Exactly. I'm with you on that opinion. Go and be defeated in a nice environment, something where you can go and console yourself, like you say, on the beach, a nice walk, and wander around a kind of an interesting city that we may not have visited before, and that's kind of the fun of it as well.
No, absolutely. I'm quite fortunate that I used to live in Spain as well, so there was a sense of familiarity, to that. Not completely, I was down the other end, I'd never been to Barcelona itself, but there's still a level of like comfortability and familiarity being in a country that you spent time in and things like that. So It was a win-win for me.
I love that. I love that we've both come away from it with a win-win in our situations. We've had matches, we've walked away with default medals, and we're white belts. And what better time to compete in our jiu-jitsu journey?
Absolutely. The girl that won my bracket, she said to me when we were waiting to go to the podium, she was like talking about the choke that she'd been working on, the one that she used on both of us to win her respective matches. And she said about how she'd been working on that in competition for a year, and you think about, how much time you have to put in to really like perfect your craft. And she was like, well, that's what we're here to do at white belt, just here to learn, here to figure it out, and I thought that was a really valid point, because again, it's like, I think we set lots of expectations, but it is just a journey of learning and figuring it out and going again, just again, but better, isn't it? That's all we can do.
Absolutely. And, working on one particular move, one submission sounds like a good plan. And if she's been doing that for a year, then all success, which is great. I think I've got some notes now and some learning points on the back of our trip to Barcelona and IBJJF Masters. Anyhow, tell me about your jiu-jitsu journey, because you've trained martial arts prior to Brazilian Jiu Jitsu.
Yeah, it's a bit of a long and complicated journey that kind of led me to the mat and where I am now, because my primary sport, I always refer to jiu-jitsu and the other sports I do as like my retirement sport, because my primary sport and my primary sort of like competitive background, I was a competitive powerlifter. So from the ages of like 18 to 24, I was very like trained almost sort of full time. I competed at a fairly high level in that sport, and that was kind of my main thing. And then after I did the British Championships, I kind of fell out of love with competing, and I fell out of love with it because I felt like I'd hit the ceiling. I felt like I'd done everything I could do. I'd gone to the regional championships, I'd qualified for my first national championship, competed at the All England, qualified then for the British Championships, competed there, and that for me, I knew I didn't have it. I didn't feel like I had it in me to go to that next level, to go into sort of that next gear, and get to sort of like the international level of sport. And I was coming to the end of my junior career. It's quite ironic that I've gone from competing as a junior to competing as a masters. Like those are my two sort of back-to-back things. But yeah, essentially, I didn't feel like I had it in me anymore, and I also was kind of burnt out from being a competitive athlete. You're training full time. I was in the gym 4 days a week, multiple hours a day sort of thing. You're again, it's a weight class sport. So at the time I wasn't in the highest weight class. I competed at heavyweight, which was sub 84. So again, and you have a bracket either side of that you have to be within. So you have to, track your weight, like track your food. And I just thought, I cannot weigh any more mayonnaise anymore. Like, I can't do it again. I can't keep weighing mayonnaise and portioning out fruit and, being in the gym 2 hours a day when I feel like I've already achieved and, beyond the thing that I wanted to kind of achieve in that sport. So I took a complete hiatus from any exercise and any sport. And I was like, I'm not doing it. I'm retired. I can't do anything anymore. And I really enjoyed it to start with, the freedom that I could just live my life. I can go out, I'm not having to miss social events, miss important things because I'm, out there grinding. But I think eventually it takes its toll, like I need to move, I need to be active. Like, it's so good for me and mental health. And like my health probably declined at that time, physical, and mental health. And I needed to kind of get back into something. And I dabbled in a few martial arts classes here and there. I did a bit of Krav Maga, like a couple of sessions of that, but that was just sort of like 100 ways to kill a man. And I don't know that it was like technical enough for what I was looking for. It didn't really stimulate the brain. And yeah, somebody local to me founded a ninjutsu school, and ninjutsu is like a Japanese martial art. So historically from the like Japanese warfare, samurai kind of times, and then obviously it has evolved into a more sort of modern self-defense technique. So it's, full contact striking, all that kind of stuff. And yeah, loved it, got really into that. It gave me that passion back for sport again, it allowed me to kind of like refocus myself, and I love to learn. So just kind of getting all that kind of stuff, and just, it was really, really positive for me, and it got me back into football, and that's, helped me in numerous other ways in my career and in my life and everything. And then unfortunately, like many things, COVID hit, and the school didn't have the resource to continue because it was fairly new. They didn't have their own premises. They didn't have a big enough membership base to kind of keep the costs running. So the school unfortunately kind of closed down, and I was just kind of missing something, I was missing it, and I wanted to get back into something. And my instructor, he was quite progressive, and he, tapped into different kind of martial arts as part of his kind of teaching, because he understood, where there's limitations and where we could pull from other kind of methods to ensure that we're best sort of protecting ourselves. And a friend of mine put a post up on Instagram about this free women's only session that she'd gone to over at Roger Gracie Bristol. It was on a Saturday morning, and she sort of said, "Oh, anyone want to come along to this with me?" And this is a friend I've known back from my sort of powerlifting days. We used to lift weights together and things like that. And I was like, yeah, why not? Wouldn't be the first weird sport we've tried together, And I went along, and that was just over a year ago now. And haven't stopped since. So first of all, it was just the free every Saturday morning session. And then since September, they've had a full women's program at Roger Gracie Bristol. So I'm able to train 3 times a week and really kind of work on my jiu-jitsu. And that's kind of where we are now, I suppose.
Fantastic. Thank you for sharing your story. I do just want to backtrack, because when you mentioned getting a default bronze in Barcelona, you mentioned that it wasn't your first medal, and now it makes sense. Your medals and your kind of progress in powerlifting to a high level in the UK. Did you enjoy your kind of powerlifting journey, aside from weighing the mayonnaise?
Yeah, no, loved it. I mean, I think we gravitate towards things that we feel we're good at, right? And I think that's quite natural, and that's why you see a lot of similar type of athletes in the same sport, because if you're shorter, you're probably better at gymnastics than you are at long jump and things like that. There's lots of things that come into it, and I think when I went to the gym one day, again, just for my mental health, just to feel better, when I was sort of like 18, because I kind of stopped all the sport that I was doing at school, and again, just saw that potentially I wasn't, looking after myself in the best way. I picked up some weights, and I was like, oh, this is good. I felt like I could progress really quickly. I felt really strong. It's really empowering to rip 100 kilos off the floor, for me it was great, and I loved it. And that's the thing, I always want to, it's never, I'm quite a competitive person, and I always want to do the best I can, so it's never enough for me, which is a blessing and a curse. It's not a trait I always like about myself, but I always want to do the best I can and push myself. So entered a regional competition, then managed to hit the qualifying total for the All England Championships, went along to that. I had a similar experience. There was 2 people in my category at that level, the highest level of powerlifting in England. There was 2 people in my category, and I got my default silver, well, it's not default in the same way that jiu-jitsu is, because obviously, one, you have to qualify, you can't just go to a national championships, but also you have to hit at least one of your lifts in all of your sort of big 3 lifts. So you do sort of have to do something. You can get disqualified and not get your medals and stuff, but very much still with the book medal. So like you said, it's not an unfamiliar experience for me to be here in a 2-person heavyweight category getting my I got default silver then, which is a little bit of something. So
it's good. I love the competitive spirit. When I had a conversation with Molly on the last episode, we were alluding to both having a kind of competitive spirit, more so than we had realised. But it sounds like you've really come to some personal awareness with your kind of competitive spirit. And do you know what? Having awareness about how we are as humans, to be able to find sports and activities that give us that edge, that kind of give us that drive. Because whilst I know we'll talk about motivation in a bit, but it's often not being motivated by kind of an external thing. There has to be some kind of internal energy and power that gets you to where you want to go. Neither of us would have probably even thought about Barcelona and Masters if we hadn't actually have wanted to compete in that space. We could have just been defeated. So I want to give credit to you for making that step and it also being your first competition, because I think that's really important to honour that, and that all of the sports that we kind of take part in, you know, there aren't swathes of women competing, and actually to progress our own physical being and mental health for our own benefits, I think is really important.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's about representation, isn't it, as well? Like, you know,
Yeah.
if you can see it, you can be it. So if we can be out there competing in these categories, competing at these levels, you know, encouraging other women to take a chance on it, and that it's not like, you know, hopefully a positive experience as an overall win or lose kind of thing, then hopefully we can, you know, we can grow the sport. When I look at what powerlifting looks like now compared to what it was when I was in it, it's worlds away. So I can see that same kind of trajectory for jiu-jitsu, and that's a very exciting place to be in, you know. Good. But yes,
it's very exciting, and of course this podcast is really to encourage more women to consider stepping on the mats and start training, and, you know, eventually have that energy, if they've, you know, secretly got that competitive spirit, to go for it. You know, like you say, if you can see it, you can be it. So which I think I will probably be taking that clip, Aimee, from you, and you'll be seeing it all over socials. This is the Jiu-Jitsu Lou podcast with me, Lou Temlett, coming to you from the UK. Go and check out the latest video clips over on jiu.jitsu.lu on Instagram. And as you're listening or watching on your favourite podcast platform, I'd really appreciate you dropping the show a rating and a review. Today, I'm having a conversation with Aimee Carver. Aimee, you spoke about training in an all-female environment. Tell me what that feels like.
I mean, it's just phenomenal. That's the only way, you know, women are phenomenal. Like, the energy is incredible. Like, you know, we can talk about the things that are relevant to us. We can talk about the ways that we have to manage our bodies, the way that we train, you know, that are different in the ways that men have to. And it's just, you know, when going back to that representation piece, you know, I've got two phenomenal brown belt female coaches, you know, one of which just won her show at Enyo, you know, and she was the British champion last year. And you think, you know, you couldn't ask for better role models. And, you know, the age groups that we have, it's from sort of 40s down to sort of like, you know, the teenagers that are just about old enough for the senior classes. And it's great just to be in an environment that is safe and welcoming and inclusive, and it's about having choices, it's about having options, you know. Like, we've got people that train in the mixed environment and train in the men's classes as they have done throughout their journey. And then you've got people like myself. I've never rolled with a man. I've never been in a mixed class. I've never felt like I needed to do that, because that's just a personal preference for me. You know, I think, you know, you train how you play, right? That's a lot of things that we talk about, you know, in a lot of sports that I've done. And like, I don't see a real benefit for me personally to train with men, you know, because I'm never going to face them in competition. And ultimately, it's a sport that, you know, as a competition sport, you know, it's not necessarily that I'm expecting to get into a scrap in the street or anything like that. I'm not preparing myself for that. That's hopefully the number one thing you learn in martial arts. The primary principles that I learned in ninjutsu and I learned in jiu-jitsu is about how you carry yourself, how you avoid those kind of things, mental, you know, like strength, and about verbal de-escalation, all those things. So I hope I never have to get in the scrap. So I'm not worried about it from a self-defense perspective. I'm just about what's realistic for me, you know. And I know a lot of women talk about how they like to roll with men because it helps them to get stronger, because men are obviously typically stronger than most women. But again, with my strength background, I don't necessarily see that as a weakness in my game, you know. I was a heavyweight powerlifter. I'm not particularly worried about not being strong enough to roll with the women in my gym, you know, or on competition mats. So, yeah, for me, it's just been great to be in an environment that is solely female focused, and to have the two guys that run the school, Luke and Clayton, the two brothers, you know, for them to prioritize women and to give them a space, you know, like. Often there's talk about lots of jiu-jitsu schools about how they're just trying to roll in the memberships, and, you know, it becomes a bit of a business. But ultimately, they could be using that mat space, you know, to get loads and loads of people in, you know. And our classes aren't the biggest classes that go through the week, you know. Sometimes there'll be 20 of us, sometimes there'll be 8 of us. It depends on the day, you know. Women have got a greater burden of childcare responsibilities and household responsibilities that we don't always think about when we think about the inequalities for their access to training and, environments like that. So, sometimes they are too busy to come to class and stuff, but, when they can make it, they're welcome back, and all that kind of thing. So for me, it's just great to be, it feels like a really safe space, a really supportive space. The guys in our gym are wonderful, do you know what I mean? And I can talk to them about sport and about jiu-jitsu all day, but just for me personally, I feel more comfortable in that environment, and I feel like it's all I really need for my journey, and I wouldn't want it kind of any other way. And I'm very grateful that we have that, because I know how rare it is. I see a lot of stuff online, when practitioners talk, later down their journey, they talk about how when they first came in the gym, they might have been the only woman, or maybe there was one other woman there. And that's never been something I've had to deal with or worry about. I've never had to go to a class and think, I wonder if there'll be any women here today that I can roll with, because there is only women in my classes, So I feel very privileged, and very appreciative that we have that environment, over at Roger Gracie. And long may it continue.
I love that. I love the energy and just being able to train with other women so regularly, because you're right. When we are looking to compete, we don't compete against men. We compete against other women. And I think there's a sensitivity, there's an energy that it's really good to become familiar with training and kind of competing in a soft, non-competitive way prior to getting to competition. And I think that's something to be said as well, and something to consider. Certainly I'm considering before my next competition, more so than I had before, because I think the kind of female dynamics are quite different. Now, I know you don't have anything to kind of compare, but how did you find your matches? Did you find that it was quite... I know there are lots of moves within Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, but was it quite familiar? Because for me, I felt like it wasn't quite so familiar with being matched with another female, which of course was going to be the case. But there was a stubbornness in the matches, which I wasn't expecting, both from me and my opponent on the day.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, because I feel like I am a person who thrives on being prepared. It's like being autistic, like my whole life is around being prepared for things, feeling ready for stuff, and I have extra time that I need to process things and prepare myself mentally for, whether it's big things or day-to-day things. And I had a very strong idea of what this would look like in my mind when I went into it. And partly that's just me kind of guessing what I thought the environment would be like, how intense I thought it would be like. And part of that was legitimately because I thought I would only have one person in my bracket. That particular person had competed at European Championships before, so I was able to watch their footage. I was able to, feel like in a way that I was preparing for, the match against this one person, and I understood a bit about their game plan, maybe some of their strengths and weaknesses that I'd identified in watching their film. And then 2 days before, that wasn't the person I was fighting first. That wasn't, the fight I was going to have. And it threw me right off, So that element of it, for sure, I felt like this is nothing like I'd planned or expected. And certainly the other side of it is like, I do hear people in the gym talk about like, competition. It's just a different intensity. It's a different environment. It's a different level. And it certainly is, because like, it's do or die, isn't it? When those grips go on, I got collar dragged into next week, literally 3 seconds into my first fight. And it's just like, there was no, let's wait and see, let's play grip fight. It was like, grab and go sort of thing. And that certainly was like, whoa, that is so much more intense. So I think the caveat to what I said before about, not feeling like I needed to get any stronger. The only thing about training in my women's class is that I am the heaviest there, I'm not light. Like I said, I train with women of a range of ages, a range of shapes and sizes, but 99% of them are much lighter than me. So they might be taller than me, but still lighter than me, or shorter than me and lighter than me. And I think sometimes I'm able to kind of get away with things in training that I probably couldn't have against these opponents, because I might have 20 kilos on someone in training, and that is a huge discrepancy, and that sort of thing. So I think I was exposed a little bit in that competition environment, because they were probably just as strong, and then also just as heavy. So all of my kind of advantage points that I have just naturally, I was like, well, they're gone. So now I just have to rely on my jiu-jitsu, and obviously super inexperienced at that. So I was like, wow, I've got nothing left there, you know, sort of thing. But yeah, it was certainly it was just so much more. Whatever level you think is going to be at, the intensity was even higher.
Yeah. And I think there's a fierceness that I certainly didn't go into the competition with an element of fierceness. And I think I need to find that kind of inner fire and fight, because, you know, training jiu-jitsu is not the same as competing jiu-jitsu. It's very much kind of achieving the moves and kind of positions and the sweeps and whatever, but probably like you, I didn't even get that far. It was the grips and the collar drags and then, you know, being reset a number of times and then, you know, going, well, how can I progress this? I'll just pull guard. So it was kind of like that. Your benefits and kind of countermeasures are being taken away step by step prior to the competition. So next time, Aimee, we're going to go in with a bit more fire and a bit more fight.
Yeah, I think I probably overcompensated. Like I mentioned earlier, I do have a really fiercely competitive streak, and I mean like fierce. Like this morning, I was at a football tournament and we did rock, paper, scissors to decide kickoff, and I won rock, paper, scissors against the other team. And you would have thought I won the Champions League. I was absolutely like celebrating, you know, and I hadn't even kicked a ball yet. So like, I think I'm hyper aware of that. And I was hyper aware of the fact that I was there at this tournament by myself, and I was the only athlete from my school, and my coaches weren't there. And I was really representing them, and I didn't want to come across negative in any way. And I think my over-competitive side sometimes can be a negative attribute for myself. You know, some people might not necessarily agree with that, but I do think I can take it a bit too far. So I was really hyper aware of kind of not allowing myself to just be absolutely feral, which I can be. I don't think that's an understatement. So yeah, I think I probably didn't let enough of it, like you say, that aggression, that kind of fierceness come through. But it's another lesson to be learned, I suppose, about managing that. It can't just be something or nothing. You have to find that balance in the middle, you know?
Yeah, I love that. And I love your story about the football match. So you're currently playing football to a kind of significant level. You're training Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. What are you still doing any powerlifting, or is that completely off the radar now?
Completely off the radar for me. Every now and then I dabble back in the gym, but yeah, I don't hit the weights as much as I probably should to supplement my jiu-jitsu training. But again, I just feel like I've been there, done that, and just there's only so many hours in the week as well, isn't there? You know, you've got to prioritize things, and it's probably not a priority for me anymore.
So how often are you training during the week now in the women's classes?
So we've got 3 sessions. We've got 2 evening sessions during the week, and then we've got our Saturday morning session, which is our sort of forever free session. So yeah, I like to think I'm one of the most regular. Try and make every session that I can. I remember my instructor said to me once, 3 times a week is a good amount of time to train. She said, you'll still forget everything, but you'll forget it a bit less. And I was like, okay, that sounds fair, you know? And I think that's probably true. So yeah, I just try and, you know, bit by bit, you're just sort of like chipping away, aren't you? You know, and some sessions I come out of it and think, I am so good at this. I've absolutely smashed it. Like I've won all my positionals. Nobody can stop me. And then, you know, the next session, I've got nothing in me. I can't even, you know, get a throw. And I'm just like, oh, what am I doing here? But you just have to keep showing up, don't you? You know, just
absolutely.
keep coming back.
Yeah, and I think that's the diversity of mindset and situation when we're training Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. You know, it can be the best day or it can be the worst day or somewhere in between. There's no consistency apart from the consistency of you turning up. What would you recommend for anyone that any female that hasn't yet stepped on the Jiu Jitsu training mats, or any kind of white belts, any advice that you would offer to them?
I think for me, obviously, my number one recommendation if you're in Bristol is to come to Roger Gracie and come to our women's class, you know. But I think in general, it's just about having a look, you know. Even if you don't roll that first session, even if you just go and watch a session, or, you watch some instructionals on YouTube or whatever, there's nothing that you can't learn on the internet these days. Like, even if you just get a little bit familiar with what it kind of entails, because I think when you talk about martial arts, it can seem really like daunting, and like, because obviously a lot of martial arts as well do come with striking and things like that. Nobody wants to get slapped around, do they? Well, they call it an MMA ground and pound, just get on the mount and start, throwing punches. And I think actually for me, jiu-jitsu is probably the least impact sport I've ever done, which is, some people would think that's really strange, but out of all the things, football, powerlifting, all of the other sports I've done, the martial arts I've done before, it's probably the lowest impact sport I've done. So I will say it's probably not as scary as it sounds. And just get yourself to a session, even if you're just watching it, and then you can make a better kind of, assumption of it. But I think the important thing is that what jiu-jitsu has brought me and what I bring so many people is community. Like, community is huge for me, and like, I find it so much easier to build relationships in sporting environments because there is a lot more rules and a lot more like familiarity and comfortability, and that's something that I really sort of thrive on. So that really helps me kind of, build relationships, without the kind of like social anxiety of it all, and not knowing kind of what to say, because there's a lot of structure to those sessions. And I think like you'll never, there's never been a training session you would regret, in my lifetime, no matter what sport it is, whether it's jiu-jitsu or anything. I've never been to a session and gone, oh, I wish I didn't go, and that's all we can kind of ask for.
Yeah, I love your share, and I think it's really important to say that the framework and the structure of Brazilian Jiu Jitsu training sessions is very much that. It takes away the social anxiety of having to make small talk with other people. If you want to, that's fine, or if you're, kind of quiet and just listening, because it takes a lot of mental kind of capacity to learn some of these things. And like you've alluded to, and I'm sure I've mentioned before, things don't stay in the first time you kind of, learn a move. You'll forget them and you'll have to re-remember them. But it's that layering up of all of those things. But certainly if any women out there are, kind of, or men or anybody suffering with social anxiety, Brazilian Jiu Jitsu is one of those kind of low impact, safe places to come to where you don't have to deal with that, but get a sense of quiet community that are there to support you, because you're all working towards exactly the same goal, which is to, well, for me, it's to live longer. And I was going to go into a Star Trek thing and live long and prosper, or whatever it is. I'm not a Trekkie, but anyone that is, I'm sure you can correct me. Aimee, what is coming up for you next? Because we've both now completed one competition. Do you have aspirations for the next one?
I think I do go back and forth on this a lot. I think when I decided to compete in Barcelona, it was kind of with the view that I would like to compete at least once every belt level if I'm lucky enough to make it my way through that journey. Again, just to get a feel of what it's like, and just to get a sense of where I am and things like that. But, I've been thinking a bit about maybe still looking out for local competitions and, doing things that's a bit less time and cost heavy. But, I think for me, the biggest thing that's next for me is just like keeping going. I just want to keep building on the things that I've, the weaknesses that were exposed during that competition, the things I feel like I need to work on, and, the things I want to prioritize. But ultimately, it's just about, showing up every week and, just trying again to be better, a little bit better every time.
Yeah. And I think, regardless of how we feel after a bad session, we are all getting better every single session. Every time you turn up, there's something that's kind of being learned, or an experience, or, how not to do a certain thing next time, or how to do it better.
Absolutely.
Aimee, thank you so much for chatting. I would love to, I'm quite nervous about this, but I do think we should put ourselves in for the same competition at some point and compete with each other. I would have to drop a number of age categories to do that, which I'm quite fearful of. But why not? If we want the experience, I think it's something that, might be an option. Anyway,
let's line it up.
Okay, that's a match. Okay, I was hoping you were going to go, oh, no, I'm not sure about that. But okay, I've picked the wrong person here. I've got a competition kind of person on my hands. Anyway, Aimee, before we continue to arrange which open or whatever we're going to put ourselves forward for, I'd just like to say thank you again. And it was great to see your face in Barcelona. And I'm sorry I wasn't there to see your match because we were both competing at the same time, which is often the challenge when women are kind of scheduled much later in the day with all of these things. But I hope to meet you on the mats again very soon. And continue your journey, your competitive spirit and your energy, which I really value. So thank you.
Thank you for having me.
You are very welcome. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Thank you for telling your friends about this show. And as soon as this episode ends, I'd really appreciate you dropping the show a rating and a review. Thanks again for listening. Catch you on the next episode of the Jiu Jitsu Lou podcast.